Today, let's talk about Western Governors University and Thomas Edison State University and how you can get a bachelor's degree in computer science in roughly 12 months. For context, I'm a self-taught software engineer working full-time at Adobe. I have a super busy schedule being a husband, a father of 5 kids, doing this YouTube thing, and a whole bunch of other stuff. For years, getting a computer science degree seemed out of reach. But that's changed. In this video, I'll share why I chose Thomas Edison over WGU, how I'm accelerating my progress while saving a ton of money, and this could work for earning other bachelor's degrees or even master's degrees, not just for computer science. I'll also share my plan going forward and why I chose to go back to school and get a computer science degree, even though I already have an amazing career without one. I'm just curious, are you interested in going back to school? If so, what degree? Let me know in the comments below. And also let me know if this is a good idea or if I'm making a horrible mistake. Okay, so let's start with my criteria for picking schools, and then we'll get into the details of a couple of schools that actually meet this criteria. First, the program needs to be entirely 100% online. I'm not going to be going and attending a brick and mortar school on campus. Just that commute to and from a school and all that time involved is just not something that I'm interested in. Second, it needs to be a school that is accredited. And it also has to have some sort of mechanism to be able to go at your own pace, whether that's to slow it down when you want to or to accelerate through the program. It'd be really nice if it's reasonably priced, and I don't want to go to one of those for-profit companies masquerading as a university. It needs to be a non-profit. And finally, it needs to offer a computer science degree, not just some other IT degree or a software engineering degree. I want to do an actual computer science degree. The first school I considered, I actually looked into several years back and also more recently, and that's WGU. In fact, I actually worked there before coming to Adobe over 5 years ago. Now, WGU is a school that gets its name because it was founded by several governors in Western states as a way to provide affordable online education, especially targeted towards people who are already in their careers. When I first looked into it several years ago, they only offered a software engineering degree, and it was tied heavily into certification exams for things like Java and a bunch of other things. And it kind of felt like it had maybe a little bit too much of an IT slant for what I was actually interested in. And if you aren't familiar with some of those certifications, they can be super difficult, require a ton of preparation and study, which can be great if you're, wanting to learn and focus on developing skills in some of those areas. But they're definitely going to be significantly more difficult than a lot of regular final tests in a regular course. And at the time, it just felt like a really big time sink to make that kind of commitment for a degree that wasn't exactly what I'm looking for. Now, fast forward today, and they actually offer a computer science degree, which is cool. WGU is pretty interesting because for tuition, you pay a flat fee for like a 6-month block of time, and you sign up for a full load of classes, and then you work through those classes as quickly as you can. And if you finish all of them before the end of that 6-month block, then you can pull in another class and you can keep going at an accelerated pace. There's also ways to, test out. If you're a working professional that has a lot of experience in an area, you can test out of the areas that you already understand and just focus on those things that you don't. So for those who do end up attending WGU, there's a lot of focus on really trying to cram in as many classes as you can to fully take advantage of that flat rate tuition and to push through the program. And as an aside, if you end up going there, I was actually the first software engineer to be working on the evaluation management application. It'd be really interesting to see how much it's changed since then. The next school that I'm considering is Thomas Edison State University from New Jersey. It's also an accredited university, but their program for online degrees is actually more similar to what you would get in an on-campus program. Their tuition and fee structure is different from WGU. Their terms are shorter, and you have the option of either paying for like a flat fee for once you get above a certain number of courses, or you can pay on a credit hour basis. There's going to be a little bit more of an expense if you're out of state for that. They also offer a computer science degree, and it is not tied to certifications the way that WGU is. So where WGU gives you some flexibility in accelerating the number of courses you can take, and they really focus on that and taking a full load, if you needed to actually do the opposite and spread things out because of a busy schedule, being able to pay on a credit hour basis lets you have that flexibility to spread things out as you need to with Thomas Edison. But for me, that's okay with my really busy schedule because there are also other ways to work with both of these schools to help accelerate what you can accomplish, and we'll be talking about that in a minute. But before we go any further, if there are some other schools that I should be considering that have these kind of programs and that really fit that criteria we talked about earlier, be sure and let me know in the comments below so that I can take a look at it and really know what my options are. So now that you know a little bit about these two schools, let's talk about the main reasons that I've chosen to go with Thomas Edison State University. The first one is that I am a super busy person, and WGU's schedule would require me to really take a full heavy load in addition to everything else that I am doing right now. And it would be really nice to save some of that money and go down an accelerated path like that. But I really think that would take a huge toll on my family emotionally, and with my schedule that can fluctuate from like busy to super busy. For example, during mountain bike season, I got everything else that's going on, but I'm also squeezing in as many bike rides as I can. Being committed to a program where I'm having to take a full-time schedule of classes just may not be worth it, even if I have to pay a little bit more to spread it out with Thomas Edison State University over the course of time. There will be that flexibility for me to kind of adjust and work with my schedule as I need to. The second reason goes back to what I talked about with Thomas Edison State University running things more like a traditional on-campus experience. And what that means is that with their course catalog, in the degree, they have 18 computer science electives that you have to take. And they have a course catalog with different options that I can pick from. That's really cool because at WGU, it's pretty much set in stone. They have a track of classes that you take, and you just start into the program, you finish the program. You don't have the wiggle room to really pick what you want to learn. And I mean, I'm not going back to school just solely for getting a degree. I am actually wanting to have that control over the courses that I take for my electives. And so that's a huge appeal for me to go to Thomas Edison. Third, if you are starting from scratch, WGU is probably going to provide a ton of help in really getting up to speed and getting a lot more experience in the area of study. And the reason for that is that a ton of their generals are actually tied in to the flow of getting your computer science degree, and are a lot of like introductory courses in this area of study. Well, for me, I already have a bachelor's degree in history, so I have a lot of generals out there, and I already have a lot of experience in the industry, so I'm not sure that spending a lot of my time taking introductory courses is something that I really want to spend my time doing. And I will be able to have a lot more of my generals fill a lot of the requirements on the degree at Thomas Edison, whereas at WGU, I will still have to take most of those classes or try to, test out of them. Thomas Edison will let me concentrate more on those core area of study classes that I'm interested in taking. And as a bonus to all of that, I'm probably going to be able to finish it up faster at Thomas Edison than I would at WGU. Now, if I didn't already have a bachelor's degree sitting out there with all of those generals, it would be a more difficult decision. There could definitely be that advantage to going to WGU and having more computer science related classes, but I still think I might lean more towards Thomas Edison for that ability to pick and choose my electives. And the fourth reason, which is actually more of a thought for me and not like a main driver of my decisions, is that when it comes to applying for jobs at different companies and you encounter employers who aren't familiar with WGU or with Thomas Edison State University, I could see a situation where they might look more favorably on Thomas Edison State University just because of the fact that it is a state university when compared to WGU, that they might just view as one of those other online schools and compare it to maybe some of the for-profit schools that are out there. Probably not a big deal, but something to think about. Now, real quick, before we move on, which of these schools sounds most interesting to you? Let me know down below. Okay, so now let's talk about how I plan to accelerate through my program and save a ton of money on the way. A benefit of going to both WGU and Thomas Edison State University is that they both accept ACE courses. And if you aren't familiar with these courses, they're courses provided by other third-party providers that go through a review process and are approved by the American Council on Education, or ACE, to basically decide that that course meets the criteria to earn it college credit. There are many of these third-party providers out there, but keep in mind that each school is different and will allow the transfer credits differently from them. Some may accept one provider and not another, or they might just allow certain courses from that provider. So if you're interested in going down this route, you'll really want to look into the provider, but also just don't make any assumptions. Also investigate what the school is accepting and realize that it does change over time. So just some of the stuff that you read online on forums could be outdated. The two providers that I'm currently using are study.com and sophia.org. I've started the application process at Thomas Edison, but I decided to hold off and try to really front load some courses through these other providers, which means that if things change between now and when I finish that application, there might be some potential issues with some of the courses that I have taken not being able to transfer over. So why would I take this risk instead of just applying to Thomas Edison? There are three reasons here. And the first is that I really wanted to kind of dip my toes into this and, sample some courses, see how I like it, see how I could fit it into my current schedule to really make sure that it's going to work with my schedule, and also to really evaluate if I am really serious about going down this approach to getting another bachelor's degree. Second, to give me time to refreshen up on college algebra because it's been a ton of years ago, and really get back into my math groove before fully diving into the program. And third, it's a lot cheaper than paying tuition. Between study.com and sophia.org, I'm paying a few $100 a month, and I'm able to take lots of courses, which is really cool because my current employer, Adobe, actually gives me a professional education fund of around $1,000 a year that I can spend on courses like this. They also offer something like $10,000 towards tuition reimbursement, so I can use my professional development budget to cover those ACE courses. And then when I'm ready to enroll at Thomas Edison, I can use my tuition reimbursement, and that's going to greatly reduce my out-of-pocket expenses. Before I get into comparing study.com and sophia.org, it's also important to remember that when you're going down this approach of transferring in these alternative ACE courses, some of the schools have some more restrictions on the number of courses that you can transfer over per type. So for example, with Thomas Edison, they allow a lot more courses to transfer over from a brick and mortar school, which is something that is going to be useful for me since I got my degree at a brick and mortar school. Then there's more restrictions around how many of these other alternatives that you can add into the mix. So it might not be, feasible to really do all of them, or it could come with other consequences in like how you're paying tuition and stuff like that. So really look into those details. For example, a gotcha at Thomas Edison is that in addition to paying a little bit extra for out-of-state tuition, if you do not take a certain number of classes, and I think it's like 15 credit hours at Thomas Edison State University, you have to pay what they call a residency waiver fee, which if you are a resident of New Jersey, I think it's like around $1,200-$1,300 or something like that. If you're out of state, you end up having to pay like $3,400-$3,500. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about those ACE courses. So far, I've completed 3.5 courses at sophia.org, and I've completed one course at study.com, and the experience has been quite different. So let's start with talking about sophia.org. The Sophia courses have each had around like 3 to 5 units that they cover, and inside of a unit, they break it down into challenges, and there's like usually another 3 to 5 challenges per unit. And then those are further broken down into learning objectives, of which there's typically been like 9 to 12, somewhere in that area. Now, for each of these learning objectives, you have the opportunity to get some course material, which could either be like a textual like article that you're reading or a video lesson. And sometimes you actually end up with multiple options for videos from different presenters, so you can get a little bit different perspective on how things go. One might explain things in a way that just makes more sense to you than the other. Now, for each of these learning objectives, you also have to take a quiz, which consists of 3 questions. Now, you only actually have to get one of them right to complete the quiz, because you can answer all 3, and oftentimes I would still go through that for practice and answer all the questions. As long as you get one question right, you get the points for that learning objective quiz. You won't get 3 points by answering all 3 right. Once you finish all of the challenges inside of a unit, they have a little bit bigger quiz that's usually around 20 questions that is timed, and that is something they call a milestone. And when you're taking a milestone, all of the questions on there count as points towards your final grade. So you do want to take those ones seriously, but it is open book, so you should be able to do pretty well on these milestones. At the end of the class, there is a final milestone, which is usually about twice as long as a regular milestone that covers everything in the class. And or they may also have you do a project, which they refer to the projects as touchstones. So far, only one of the 3 classes had a touchstone that I had to do, and that was an Intro to Programming in Java class. And at the end, you actually had to plan out an application that solves a certain problem that you define and go through all the steps of planning the application, writing pseudocode, stuff like that, and then finally writing the application in Java. It wasn't too bad. It's kind of a fun project. The courses are pass-fail. You just have to get over 70% right, and since it is open book, you really should be able to pass these classes. Okay, so let's move on to study.com, which is a little bit more involved. And I completed the Computer Science 306 Computer Architecture course, which had like 13 lessons. And inside of each of those lessons, you had usually 8 to 10, 11 lessons, which could be either like a text article or it could be a video. At the end of each lesson, you have a quiz that you take. There was 5 questions. Now, compared to Sophia.org, all 5 of these questions count for points towards your final grade. So you definitely want to take these seriously. At the end of this course, I had to take a 100 question multiple choice proctored exam, so it's not open book. And then I also had to do a couple of assignments. Now, the first assignment was more of a text written based assignment where you're kind of explaining your thoughts on certain things, and then there was some math calculations, stuff like that you had to do. The second assignment was a lot more involved. You're basically having to go and design the circuits for all the different sub-circuits and then compose them into larger circuits to build an ALU, an arithmetic logic unit, and then integrate that into a CPU. And you're doing all of this in Logism, and you're having to explain kind of why you're choosing how to do these things and tying that all together. That was a pretty intense assignment. In this course, you get 300 points total, and to pass, you have to get at least 70%. The breakdown was 100 points that you got from the quizzes. Even though there's more than 100 questions, you had 100 points that was split between the 2 assignments, so 50 points each. And then you had 100 points for the final. The final is an open book, but what ended up happening in my case was that I had gotten 99 points on the quizzes, and then I got 46 points on each of the assignments, ended up scoring 72% on the final. I hadn't had my second assignment graded before I took the final, and I guess technically I wouldn't have actually needed to submit that second assignment. I could have just taken it and gotten the passing grade because this is a pass-fail class, right? Well, sort of, and we'll get into that in a minute. Some people will take an approach where they'll focus more on doing a really good job on the assignments, especially that really hard assignment, so that they can, maybe not have to do as well on the final, because this course just covers a ton of information and it's a lot to really take in, so many different topics. Or others will focus more heavily on doing really well on the final and try and take that and then determine how much effort they have to put into that assignment. Now, I didn't end up resubmitting any assignments, but apparently you can resubmit them for more points if you make improvements on the assignment. And then you can retake the final, I think, up to 3 times. Now, with study.com, you're basically paying a monthly subscription, and I think you get 2 finals that you can take per month. Otherwise, you have to pay an extra fee of $75. And then in between retakes, you have to wait 3 days. So, I mean, you could use some of those retakes and, pay, and there's a little bit of flexibility there, but you have 3 attempts to pass that final. I mentioned that the pass-fail of study.com is a little bit wonky, and here's why. There are a couple different ways that you can get these ACE transcripts. So as I understand it, with Sophia.org and with study.com. You can send off when you've completed the course, it gets submitted to ACE, and you can actually have an ACE transcript sent over to the universities, which will show it as pass-fail. In the case of study.com, they also have a way to send the transcript directly from them to a university. And for Thomas Edison State University, they request that you do it that way. And when that happens, it'll also show up with your score for that class. That said, when Thomas Edison receives your transcript, apparently, even though there's the grade on it, they will still just accept it as pass-fail. But this is something to keep in mind, because since each school handles things differently, there is the possibility that there's a school that might require you to send it from study.com and they will get your score. And so if you're just looking to do like the bare minimum just to like pass, then it's possible that that could end up on your transcript somewhere down the road, which could impact you if you decide later on to maybe go get a master's degree. And by no means am I suggesting that you should just be like shooting for the bare minimum just to pass. Like, a goal for me personally is to try to actually learn from courses that I'm taking. So even though I could have probably skipped turning in that second hard assignment, I still did it because I wanted to get the experience and learn. So what do I even think of these ACE courses? Well, honestly, I have some mixed feelings. So let's first talk about the things that I do like about them, and then let's talk about the things that I don't like. Because I have several years experience as a software engineer, I do like that these courses offer me the ability to really be able to speed through them or slow down as I want. For example, on that computer architecture class, there were a lot of sections there that were just covering tons of stuff that was like, while it was interesting, it's not something that I see myself having to really work with on like a daily basis. And so I kind of would work through those sections at a medium pace. Then there are some lessons that were just like super trivial stuff that I could just like blow through, go take the quiz. And then there are other areas that were like really interesting, like working with Carnot maps and learning how to use arithmetic to simplify Boolean expressions. That was really cool. So I was able to take some time, slow down, and really focus on learning it at my pace and absorbing that. I decided to be selective on that course because it covered so much information, everything from like the theory of like computation to the theory of binary, the theory of computer components, to doing math with binary and octal and hexadecimal systems, to all the way to quantum computing and circuit design and building the CPUs and stuff like that. And so when it came time for even on the final, it was like super wide, lots of questions like, this person invented this theory on whatever math in what year, and a bunch of questions like that. It's some stuff that I just was not going to dedicate the time to really like memorize all of that stuff, since it isn't that actionable. Perhaps the most frustrating thing about that computer architecture course was that it sometimes you'd get a lot of really good explanations, and then other times the lessons were just like horrible at explaining things. For example, when it came to designing the circuits for that ALU, there are some ultra basic explanations on, working with the different logic gates and kind of explaining what they were with some really trivial circuit examples. And then the assignment is you have to go out and build 15 to 20 small circuits that then had to be composed into larger ones. And the course did not really prepare you whatsoever for doing this. And that isn't just me. If you look online at reviews about that course, a lot of people complain about that, and we end up actually going to other resources. In my case, I ended up taking a course on Udemy that taught me more about ALUs and the circuit design stuff so that I could actually do the assignment. It would have been nice if that information was available in the course itself. The computer architecture course was also significantly more difficult than all three of the ones that I took at Sophia, because it was just all over the map on what it was covering. And so taking that final, I just decided to shoot at the hip and see what score I could get by taking the test without studying, and then try to make up for it on my assignment. I ended up getting that 72% on the final and like 87% overall in the class. I could have fought for that A, but I just decided that trying to memorize all that minutia and stuff just wasn't going to be a good return on investment for me, so a B it is. Now, a benefit of having so many quizzes and so many sections on the study.com courses is that you have a lot of points to work with. Now, my experience with Sophia was a lot different. The first course that I took with Sophia was the Intro to Web Development course. Now, I've been building web applications and using JavaScript frameworks and stuff like that for a very long time, and I'm very familiar with it. And so coming into this course, I ended up doing a lot of just skimming to see if there's any sections that was going to introduce anything that, was new or interesting. And I just wasn't finding much that was that technical. So I just kind of blew through it and answered all the challenge questions, answered all the milestones. And admittedly, that was the easiest college credit course that I have ever completed in all of my schooling. I did the whole course in like an hour, maybe an hour and a half, something like that. What surprised me most about that course was that it was on web development and there was not a single assignment that you had to turn in for doing HTML, CSS, JavaScript, anything like that. Now, someone just starting out and completely new to this stuff, I'm sure there's a lot of information that they would have gotten from that course, but the fact it didn't have an assignment kind of had me questioning whether Sophia was even going to be like a good option. Since I needed to do a refresher on college algebra anyways, I decided to give it kind of a second chance, and I started into a college algebra course on Sophia. And that one ended up feeling a lot more like a regular course, and the lessons were a lot better, I felt. I was still surprised that you really don't have like homework assignments that you're doing with the math. It's, you have those quizzes or the, challenges that you have to take. So it really is on you to kind of go above and beyond to, find some, options or questions if you want to really drill it into your head if you needed that. For me, fortunately, it's more of like a refresher. So this kind of works, but I definitely feel that the presentation of this course is a lot better than the one with the Intro to Web Development. What it did do was give me a little bit more hope about some of the Sophia courses, that there are some that could be worthwhile. So I ended up taking like an IT networking class, which definitely was more involved than the web development. It wasn't like a super difficult class, but I felt like it too was a little bit better than that Intro to Web Development. So just if you take that Intro to Web Development, have low expectations for that class. The third class that I ended up completing was an Intro to Programming in Java class, and that one was actually the most interesting of the classes that I've taken so far. I feel like it's done a pretty good job of like explaining concepts and working you through things, and the questions that it asked were had some like pretty good questions to kind of quiz you on stuff. But more importantly, at the end of this class, you also have to do an assignment where you had to do that planning that I mentioned, where you're planning out a project that or an application that you're going to build, and then you actually have to build it in Java, and you had to like submit like all your code and stuff like that. That was a worthwhile project to really help things sink in, and definitely had much more of a, okay, this definitely feels like a college credit type course for me as far as like introduction levels go. That said, an observation I do have about Sophia is that across all the subjects that they offer courses in, they have like intro to more advanced topics. But when it comes to computer science courses, they're actually quite limited. I think it's only like, 6 classes under like the computer science section. And then I think they have some other like maybe IT stuff I'd have to, double check on. But it's much more limited selection compared to like study.com, where you have a pretty huge catalog and a lot more of like the 200, 300 level courses that you can take on study.com inside of like the computer science area. So armed with all this information, what is my plan going forward? First, I'm going to finish that application to Thomas Edison State University. And again, definitely let me know if there's any colleges that I should consider that have these online programs that meet my criteria that I should consider. And then what I'm going to do is see how well these ACE courses actually transfer over to evaluate whether this is a good plan to actually incorporate them in, or am I wasting my time on some of this stuff? Second, for any of the courses that kind of overlap heavily with areas that I have a lot of experience and expertise in that I'm not going to get much from the class, I'm definitely going to probably still leverage these ACE courses, whether it's through sophiastudy.com or even like the Thomas Edison course, whichever one looks like I'm going to be able to just like, get through it quickly so that I can focus on the more meatier topics. Third, for the core computer science courses, I'm really going to prioritize taking them at Thomas Edison State University. And or if I look at like study.com and there's a course that's like, okay, this looks like it's going to provide a lot more information, or maybe the course integrates with a programming language that better aligns with languages that I'm interested in learning, then I might consider going that route. But I'm going to really be choosy over which course is going to actually give me the most knowledge and be of the most benefit to me, not from a perspective of trying to just like rush through this as quickly as possible. And so in my case, I have a lot of experience with JavaScript, but I definitely would have interest more in courses that are diving into Java and Python, and to be able to get more experience in those areas. Fourth, for the 18 credit hours of electives at Thomas Edison, I really want to look for classes that are just like really interesting for me, and that are going to also give me like experience outside of my current sphere of understanding. For example, I'd like to take some classes on machine learning and really, come to understand that more instead of at like a superficial level, try to get some more like hands-on experience in that area and in other areas. Now, fifth, when it comes to math, I've talked to several coworkers and friends who have computer science degrees to really ask them, okay, how much of calculus do you find really useful to the stuff that you're doing on a day-to-day basis? And a lot of them really feel that it's not much. Now, those who are dealing more with data and other things do, have recommendations for things like classes like discrete math, which is one of the requirements at Thomas Edison, and also like linear algebra and stuff like that. So my plan is to not really sink my time in to like, calculus and stuff at like, Thomas Edison. Instead, I'm going to focus on really kind of like working through that, get the foundation as quickly as I can, pass those courses and stuff. So that could mean at like study.com, it could mean at sophia.org. I'm still kind of undecided on the calculus course. And then I'll probably end up taking like discrete math at, Thomas Edison, and maybe look for an option of being able to take like linear algebra somewhere, even if it's not part of my actual requirements for the degree. So I'll probably leave that one out of the timeline for getting this degree as kind of like maybe something I do like at the very end. This sounds like a ton of work, especially considering the fact that I have an awesome, good paying job and have lots of experience as a software engineer. And I could just like stay the course and just kind of keep going down the path that I'm going. Why would I even do this to myself? Why would I choose to go back and get a computer science degree? Well, there are a couple of reasons. And first, for several years, I have felt that if I could go back in time, instead of getting that history degree, I 100% would have gotten a computer science degree. I mean, I've learned a lot going down the self-taught route and gained perspectives that I probably wouldn't have had if I had gone through a computer science degree. But I'm not going to be so arrogant as to say that I have learned everything that I would have learned if I had taken a computer science degree. As an example of that was that section on the Boolean expressions and how to use math to simplify those expressions. I mean, I have to use Boolean expressions like all the time, and for some of the more complex ones, it is really cool that if I ever wanted to really optimize that, something that's super complex, I could do it mathematically instead of just relying on trying to figure it out. And frankly, you don't know what you don't know. And all that stuff that I learned on the computer architecture class that I probably won't use, well, hey, if I ever end up needing to use it, at least now I know what it is and what to look for. Second, there are self-taught software engineers who are significantly better than some of the guys that have computer science degrees. And there are guys with computer science degrees who are significantly better than a lot of guys that have gone down the self-taught route. Now, I try not to get in the one side or the other and view people at more of an individual level, but if I'm being completely honest here, when it comes to hiring someone and you have two people who are at about the same level of experience and seem to have about the same level of skills, and one of them has a computer science degree and the other one doesn't, it is easier to give the benefit of the doubt to the person with the computer science degree as having a certain level of education in like all of these areas, and you just don't fully know what the self-taught person can do or what gaps might be there. They could be totally amazing, or they could have some really significant gaps in their understanding. And despite what other people say, I do believe that in the industry, there is still a little bit of a bias towards computer science degrees. Third, it is an opportunity for me to really focus and pick up some skills that could put me in a lot better position to navigate the changes that are happening in our industry. It's getting harder and harder to really predict where or how fast things are going to go. But having a computer science degree and starting to spend some time learning more about these areas could be super valuable and allow me to make pivots in my career if I need to do that in the future. And number 4, the biggest reason is just because I want to. I'm really excited about this. I love to learn, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and Adobe's going to pay for it, so why not? Given my current progress, my goal is to complete this computer science degree in about 12 months from when I first started. There are a couple factors that could come into play that could affect that, because this would require that I end up having to take multiple classes at a time at Thomas Edison State University if I want to get those 15 credit hours to be able to avoid paying that residency fee. Or if I'm okay with paying that residency fee, I might have to take a few more classes at study.com or sophia.org. Whatever the case, I don't want to just skimp on my education. I really want to take advantage of learning these core areas. So the plan is 12 months, but if life happens and it takes a little bit longer, I'm okay with that. And for the record, I started this journey in that first course on October 17th, and I'll see you in the next one. Lates.